Independent, 55% Democrat.
Democrat, okay. Okay. And how many did you get?
I got 50.
You got 50, okay. Very good. Okay, Nancy Cooper.
Yes. The comment that Roger was making, I wanted to make sure when I went to that door that people knew, i.e., are you registered at this home that you live in? I mean, I didn't want to get trivial signatures because that just meant, you know, a staff member or somebody else is going to be spending more time. I did not do the go stand and dismiss because those are, to me, in my opinion, a waste of time. And it's amazing that people said, gee, I don't know, maybe I'm still registered over on Wilmot. And yet on the sheet, they've lived there for 10 years.
Yeah.
So then you pull out your registrant. Would you like to register to vote?
Right.
But, you know, I really worked hard and the 4 volunteers I had to make sure that you're not going to get somebody that lives east of Tramway, that they live west of Tramway. And still I got 340 signatures for 196. So it is work, but it also educates the public of, oh, gee, I'm not in the old Camp Craven district. All that changed. So there was a good education factor there, and I agree with Erica. I liked it. It was delightful. So my husband got bit by a dog, but besides that, it was delightful.
Whose fault was that?
Unless yeah. But thank you.
Okay, let's keep moving on. Josh, you're up.
This has been brought up before, but something drastic needs to be done to clear up the voter registration rules. I actually tried to go meet the people in my precinct, the precinct captain. It was a nightmare, okay? I couldn't find anybody there, and the guy, I've lived here 5 years, 10 years. So these people don't live here. I've never lived here before. And then there's the right to return thing. I have a neighbor. He and his wife are registered independent. I'm not even sure his wife's registered. I know he's registered independent. They've got a daughter. I don't know where the heck she lives, but she's registered as a Republican at his house. And you know, when candidates come by, we did have candidates come by yesterday, and I met him in the street, one of ours, and he said he knocked on Bush's door, and talked to his wife, and supposedly their daughter still lives there. Although I happen to know she doesn't live there. Okay?
Okay.
What I would suggest we do is something really drastic, like we do for the every 10 years we have a census, right? Why can't we just hit the reset button every 10 years or so? Purge all the voter rolls, not just, you know, the ones who need to get taken off. Take everybody off and make everybody re-register. I don't think. I do not think that the federal government can tell us we can't do that. Yes, they can. All right. Let's keep moving on. Let's do it anyway.
Don Patterson, then Rhonda Lashman, Mark Riley, David Harris, and Janice.
Okay, a couple of things. I don't know if you all noticed on the radio, there's the state income support group is running a bunch of ads on registration. You can do it at the income support group. Does the state have that much money that they can afford to spend money on advertisement for people to register at the income support group as opposed to the county clerk?
Support division.
No, it's paid. They might have a special thing. Also, you know, I'm so proud of New Mexico, Sunland Park. You know how, you know, different levels of shit. We're almost reaching the 10th circle. And one thing about, I think it's Linda Lopez, I think she has the old district that has Curlin Air Force Base in it. You know, you have the portions by population. Curlin Air Force Base has 12,000 people that's in each district, and 3 are registered to vote in New Mexico. And so it's kind of curious to me that you all had to do hundreds of signatures, And this Senate district has 78 required, because the number of people voting between the illegals and Kirtland Air Force Base, the actual population is pretty limited. And you know, Josh asked about the kids living at the address. Well, health care, as long as you're living with your parents, you're 35 years old, still get the health care. Why not be registered to vote there?
There you go. All right, Ron Delashman.
Nancy.
Yes, Ron.
I told you, my dog was drinking beer. He already apologized for the fight, so let's rock, okay? Why can't we send these folks that are getting signatures, gee, this is novel, with the actual list from the official folks office that has all the names and addresses on it, that they could maybe do a little correlation while they're out in the field and turn in the erroneous ones.
They do.
They do. Well, we don't get those lists until late.
Well, it's called a walk list.
Yeah, but
well,
it's up to the secretary, it's up to the...
This is for Janice. I understood that y'all get your competitors, copies of your competitors' signature list to have your staff check as well. Is that correct?
You have to request it.
Well, okay, but you can get it.
But you can get it.
Okay, so that's why I signed everybody's list, because I don't want anybody pissed off at me, so I signed So if you have the list right there, don't you send up a red flag to the clerk or anything like that, or?
The clerks don't enforce. Not where the enforcement is.
Well, I understand, but don't they at least listen?
Nope.
Nope.
Not their job.
There's your problem.
Not their job.
There you go. All right, Mark Farley.
Sorry I'm late today. I got a phone call from a lawyer.
Oh, no.
Oh, no.
Wasn't bad. Trying to make government better. So you want to run. In my book, that's all it ought to take. The idea of parties, I'm with Jefferson, 50 to 100. He was not a great party man. The idea of what's reasonable and what's unreasonable is, of course, in the eye of the beholder. And to live to Galen's standard of reasonable, then I gotta get there. But let's look at what the idea is of candidates getting petition signatures. The idea, as put forth in legislation and so forth, is that the candidate is known by the constituency, to the point that they're willing to say, yeah, I want this person to run. And as an idea, that's fine. It's really a great idea. Now let's look at the reality. Volunteers who stand in for the candidate, or the paid volunteer.
You actually more on paid volunteer?
Paid volunteer, who has a copy of the white pages and comes up with these terrible signatures. And in my looking at voter fraud, the one case that I know of that actually took place was in the signature gathering for Don Harris's recall several years back. And there were 9 people who came out of the phone book. And they filed a complaint with the city clerk, because it was a city issue, went to the county clerk, went to the county sheriff, and sacked. And the investigator over there said, well, I wasn't getting cooperation from the complainants. He had written complaints in front of them. He did have their names and addresses because the paid person actually got them right. But Darren White would not move on that case. And they were very upset when I publicized it and said they would get back in touch with me. First of all, because they hadn't done anything. And the reason I knew that was I went to the city records division and I pulled the number for the report, because they had gotten a report number, but there has never been a report turned in. You know, that insider trading kind of thing helps a little bit, knowing what's going on. The day after I posted, a report came into the records, but they never finished that up. So we've got really big problems. With computers these days, there are states in this country that say you want to run, come on down, put your filing fee in, and you're on the ballot. And the computers can work that out. I'm not a big party fan. Republicans ran me off, and I feel much better now. Not an organized.
Thank you for that revelation. All right, David Harris, and then Janice, Dolores, and Ron.
I think this year the voting has changed significantly, and I believe that there's going to be no straight party voting. There's not going to be a button at the top of the thing that says Republican or Democrat. And that is exactly right. It was never in the law in the first place, and I think the Secretary of State decided they don't have to have it on the ballot now. And that, of course, addresses a little bit of this issue about party and so on. You're still going to have to vote for the person that you like. The door-to-door, when you get the walk list, typically from out of voter vault, there's usually a whole bunch of information on there and some check boxes that you can have the person that you talk to fill in some information. You want to volunteer, you want to yard time, those kind of things. So nothing stops candidates from starting that type of door-to-door very early on. In fact, yesterday would have been a good day to start that. So you don't need this nominating petition kind of thing to do that grassroots door-to-door work on the thing that they call the basis of campaigning is meeting the public. So having this arbitrary, and I will use this word again, arbitrary number of signatures to get, they may have a very specific metric that they use, the number of votes that happen, so on and so forth, but choosing that as a metric is still arbitrary. It could have been, why not how many precincts you have? Why not how many, kids voted next door? I mean, it's still an arbitrary number to get. The point is, though, that any candidate that's the least bit interested in running for an election is going to do this exact same door-to-door stuff anyway, just to get elected. And instead of getting signatures for petitions, you ought to be getting signatures for, can you work on my campaign? Can you be a volunteer? Can you put up the yard sign? Can you hand out, do drop literatures? Can you give me money? And those kinds of things. So, which is much more relevant than getting some goofball signature for the state.
Okay, very good. Yes.
Okay. I apologize for missing the first part of the discussion, but I wanted to just remind you of some of the history. And I went back and checked why we have the petition process versus the filing fee. It was in the early 70s. It was a Democratic Party problem. 22 people ran for Senate. The problem about having that long a ballot is it was argued that it actually stifled voter participation because it made, one, the ballot extremely long, and people just at a certain point they just stopped checking boxes. And I'm hoping with the change in the law this year where you cannot vote straight party ticket that at least the judges will be weighed in upon, because that does not happen. So with regard to the petitions, if you look at it in that light, maybe there really is a good argument for the petitions, but there are some problems with the petitions alone. So let me first state that the Secretary of State issues petitions beginning October 1st. There are 6 months available to collect signatures. For the major parties, the signatures are sometimes, the requirement is sometimes laughable. 24. There were times, I never got quite to 24. I think the fewest I ever had to get was like 58, because we had a high percentage of voting there. The formula is based on the last time a governor was nominated. That is, and what the ultimate vote was. That's the formula. It is arbitrary. Now, if I go over, because I do think ballot access is important, and I look at the independents who are almost fully 20% of our voters, the individuals who are running as independents have an astronomical number that they must file. I think John Barry has to get over 4,000 signatures.
No way.
Wait. over 4,000. No one else in the other parties have that measure to get to at all. Now, the other way you can look at this is he does have until June 5th to file that, so he has, you know, even longer. It's 8 months to get the signatures, but it is a great disparity. The last thing I wanted to remind you of is, if you decide to run as a candidate, it's your responsibility to know the rules. And having been through this several times now, one of the things that I learned, and I'll pass this on to you, you will always have people who will say at the door, yes, I'm a registered Republican. It's your job to go check. And you check that daily so that you don't have to check them all at once at the end. And for those of us who did that, because there is a range, and so I want you to know, in my petition process, when we submitted, we knew that our petition had a 72% accuracy rate. Now, you can say I did something wrong, but I was checking Dan. I knew his was at 58%. What surprised me was a discussion with Representative Tom Taylor, who went himself door to door in Farmington. His accuracy rate was 40%. 40%. He was sweating bullets because if you are at an accuracy rate of 40%, then you have to have 3 to 4 times the number of ballots. You have to go do it. So all of those things add up. Is it a good process or a bad process? So getting to Galen's point, for the normal candidate, probably an okay process. For a recently appointed judge, an absolutely unfair process. Absolutely unfair. And I just, you know, I don't know how we change this around, because someone who is appointed within 60 days of this due date, I just don't know how you do that. And as to David's point, and I will just tell you, there's a secret on the other side too. Voter vault, shoot. Let me see if I can say that better. Because it is so inaccurate. But going back to Ron DeLashman's point, so I have the voter databases, Ron. Why is it wrong? And it goes back to you. So it is your responsibility to update your voter address. It's your responsibility to make sure you update your address on your driver's license. And you don't have to raise your hand, but I'm going to lay money that 10% of the people in this room have an out-of-date voter registration address or driver's license address. Both are the law. So given that, you know, voter vault it's the same thing. All databases, and for those of us who like databases, they take a tremendous amount of care and feeding. But the Secretary of State is under several requirements, not the least of which is the Motor Voter Act, passed, 1993, is that right, the Motor Voter Act? 9293. And all of this is meant to, this is my summation, improve voter participation. And by the way, we have increased our voting ability to a voting season of 28 days. And the number of increase in participation is what?
0.
Zippo nada. So is it time to think outside of the box about this? Perhaps. But I am with Erica. The best part of campaigning and of serving is the answers and the problems are at the front door. And people who express them to you actually have a really clear idea of how to solve the problem if you will just listen. And it's my favorite part. It is.
There we go. Okay, Ron, you're next.
I just wanted to,
Yes.
I just want to say that one of the problems, and I made over 1,000 calls to victory. You're dealing with the voter vault system. You have no way of adding anything to. You can't add a cell phone number. You can't change anything. You take it as it is, and that's why it's 50% wrong. Mark.
Nancy.
I got a text from my big daughter. She said, go home, have a beer, and watch Channel 7 tonight, and you'll see an 89-year-old nun who is real ticked off that she got registered for somebody she never heard of. In fact, all her nun buddies are real ticked off, too. So despite what the Democrats say, there is voter fraud. I'll have to tell you which side they were on, by the way. Go on.
All right.
simply want to see prosecutions, investigations and prosecuting. I don't, Rogers has tried to feed me information about all the voter fraud there is, and to date has yet to hand me a piece of paper upon which I can go look at anything.
Go read Indiana's recent case.
All right, let's move on. Let's move on to New Mexico. Jim Roller, you're up.
Good morning. Good morning. Charlie Rose, you know, is on PBS, and he had a guy on named Charles Duhigg, and he's a very bright young man. And so I bought his book, The Power of Habit, and it's about how to change your life. And it's long, and it's got a lot of stuff in it. Don't buy it. I'll summarize. If you want to change your life, pick one thing you want to change, and then do one thing about it once a week. It takes less than 10 minutes. And put that in your schedule, like every Monday afternoon I'm going to do this for 10 minutes. Okay, now you save that book. We all know there's three kinds of lies. There's white lies, damn lies, and statistics. So if you look at statistics, the United States has the highest cost per capita of medical associated costs. Not dollars per hospital or something, but if you look at how much goes into your maintenance of staying healthy, the United States is the highest in the world. And you think like, okay, so now where is that cost located? Well, it's located under the habits, and if you go, I've been spending a lot of time in the emergency room there because it's a friendly place, and there's a law, there's a federal law that says something about emergency rooms and anything. But anyway, I've been spending a lot of time there, and I have some experience with being in the wrong place at the right time, and people shoot at you, and you get real hurt. Because those bullets, they can, anyway, it's really dangerous. and we could tell the difference between a person that had a hangnail and a person that had, you know, a problem. And in the emergency room, there were, I would say, something in the order of 95 to 99% hangnails and 1% problem. And they do not triage there unless you fall down or blood is spurting on their wall and their carpet. Otherwise, you just sit there. And the blood drips off, in my case, it just drips off onto the floor slowly, and you get a towel, and it just keeps dripping for 3, 4, 5, 6, in my case, 7 hours. Okay, so what is happening there, and what is the cost associated with that kind of evolution? And you think like, well, how do we approach this problem? Well, the federal government, of course, is solving all the. I'm a Democrat, so we solve all of the world's problems from on high. Very successful. And of course, the bigger problem is how do we spend money? And we're good at it. And so the bigger social problem is what do we need to do to change the way that our health care is taken care of? Not government, not state, not local. What do we need to do overall to change everything? Mainly, we have to become a society where people are interested in being healthy as opposed to going to the doctor and them giving you some kind of something. And now you have to say, okay, so there's where we need to be. We need to be a healthier people. And then you have to work your way back and say, okay, well, we're not there. And what we're doing now with these big expensive hospitals and doctors and chiropractors and all these, and there is a ratio between, you know, how much, you know, the more medical training you have at the university, the more cost you associate with your patient load. More tests, more pills, and so being a doctor is very bad. If you want to die, go to the hospital. You find out that 90-some% of people die in the hospital. So if you want to have only a 10% chance of dying, don't go to the hospital. Now, if you can get healthy, then you can give more money to the people who really need the help, and you can distribute. You can I'm a Democrat. We like to redistribute. So we're going to take money from the people that are wasting it by just sitting at home and give it to the poor, the people that really need help. And there are some people that really need help, and there's plenty of money around. It's just wasted. Now, so what we have to do is come up with some ideas. And we have to come up with some ideas that transfer things from inefficiency, that's government, hospitals, doctors, patients, lawyers, bankers, big business, corporations, and put that ability into people like in your pocket, in your house, in your family, into your responsibility. And I have some ideas, so I'm going to write a book.
Oh, good.
Oh, good. And it'll be shorter than this, because I summarized this one in one sentence. But anyway, and when you think about things like the national debt, you know, the national debt, they say is $16 trillion. That's true, but it is statistics, and it's completely misleading in a number of ways, because a bunch of that debt is associated with entitlement programs or benefit programs, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, a couple others. And that money is money that they've kind of transferred, you know, they took the money, they took the cash and spent it, but there's just an IOU there. So what we could do is we could let all the people that are getting those benefits that don't really need it and just have a euthanasia clinic. And that debt would go, and that debt would all go away. So we could save, I think it's $6 trillion. We could save $6 trillion by Wednesday of this coming week.
Thank you so much.
What are you running for?
I think if we pass a law to ban people to going to the emergency room if they have a hangnail, we could solve a lot of problems.
They actually could change
They
that.
could change the dynamic of every emergency.
Just control of borders.
Now you're jumping to conclusions. You know, as a percentage, I think that less than half of the people there were illegal aliens.
There you go.
Less than half.
Less than half.
Maybe 46%.
All right, let's keep moving on. Erica, you're up.
At the risk of beating the dead horse about voter petitions, I just wanted to say I didn't realize that I agree that the number that you have to get on your petition is arbitrary. At the same time, it's arbitrary based on how many people voted in the last election. And let me just say that one piece of advice for my district was go to every Republican in my district. And quite frankly, I think the reason why it's important to do that is because Cheryl Williams Stapleton has been in office for 17 years, and I think there's been some apathy about who can get her out or not. And so I think a lot of Republicans just checked out. And so knowing that piece of information, that it's based on the percentage of voters, and that's how 24 was my magic number, makes it even more important for me to hit every Republican household and let them know that they have a choice now. And but I also have to get, the soft Dems and the independents also. But I think it's important to get to the Republican voter in my district.
I think a lot of us would agree, if the base of the Republican Party goes out and votes, they don't sit on their hands, they go out and vote, elections will be won. But they have to get off their hands and quit arguing about one issue. If you're together with most of us, go vote. It works. Ron, do you have a quick?
Well, I just saying, maybe we need to run those 22 people, and then 21 of them jump on the bandwagon and all put their efforts behind the one who got the most votes.
There.
That would send a nice signal.
See?
What a concept.
What a concept. I like that. Okay, David Harris, you're up.
Yeah, just a couple quick comments on the voter vault issue. I don't try to support the data that's in there, but I think the forms that they print out and some of the map stuff that they give, that's useful, because it has a lot of information. It's just the form is just blank, like a name, an address, a private thing, 6 different things that you can volunteer for, which is very important at this time to get your volunteers, get your organization put together. So the voter vault data, as we all know, is 40-50% incorrect or obsolete. But again, the form, that kind of thing is necessary. The other thing I want to mention is just about addresses in general. And you alluded to this. There's legitimate addresses where people have just moved to a different place and no longer registered there. There are other things that are in the voter rolls which are what I call illegitimate or illegal, not illegal, but just aren't addresses at all. And the example I use is in my block. There's a 13400, and then the next house is 13408. And 13404 is not a residence. It doesn't address, it's an invalid delivery point, is what they call it.
But it is a potential.
Well,
According
it
to-
may very well be a potential if somebody wants to build a house and there's 5 feet between my neighbor's house and my own house.
Right.
If you have a voter that's registered on 13404, that's probably an inappropriate, invalid address and ought to be able to get thrown out just because it's invalid. Well, unfortunately, they are not being purged from those. And I think, of course, there's the other kind of address that's just that is just a geo-coordinate, for example. So, just because somebody doesn't own a house or live in an apartment doesn't mean you want to disenfranchise that voter. And he can give you I live in the storm sewer between Eubank, and that's perfectly legitimate.
Sure.
And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, if that's where he claims is his domicile, he ought to be able to register to vote at that address. If somebody who claims they live at 13404, that's a little bit, that should not be allowed, and that one should be thrown out. I don't know what the courts would say about that, but those kind of addresses are on the rolls and have no business being there, in my opinion.
Was it in Keebler and there was a tree there maybe?
Well, yeah, there was a tree that had, a tree. I didn't see any, I didn't look at that. And I think there was another address that was essentially the manhole cover in the middle of the street.
Right.
It
might be valid, we don't.
Well,
Except there are 160 people registered.
and let me tell you, that's part of it, IT. That's an information technology failure.
Right.
To not recognize those kinds of addresses. That is absolutely something that the clerks ought to be a little bit smarter about. Instead of using the process they do use, they could improve that a little bit without changing the law, I think.
Remember, they're bureaucrats. Bureaucrats only do what's specified and as easily as possible.
Well, when they write the specifications, you're absolutely right.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, Janice, you're up.
Okay, so, it's two things, and it really is, until you get in this, you don't see all the chinks in our armor. So, I'm sure many of us went as delegates either to a Democratic or a Republican convention. I can only speak for the Republican side, but I know from personal knowledge, because I tried to knock on the door, that 3 of our delegates gave false addresses, and those false addresses are in the Secretary of State's database.
Ooh.
How does that happen? How does that happen? And so, which leads me to, okay, so we've had this great discussion about petitions and whether or not it's good to interact with voters or it shouldn't be an issue. And so now we're going to go to the court. And what is the court saying about whether or not the activities of petitions are good and disenfranchising voters? I noticed that Terry Brandenburg today got a ruling that said her opponent in the primary was 1 vote short, and that by court ruling, that person has been removed from the ballot. Could be challenged. The history of challenging is anything less than 100 bad signatures has not been upheld by the court. The court says, well, we don't want to disenfranchise them. And it's been a very interesting journey. So here we are talking about voter fraud, and from the get-go, our courts do not uphold any standards. How do we resolve this? If this is the requirement, and you're a responsible candidate, or an irresponsible candidate, why is it that the court is simply ignoring the rules that are plainly written? Why is that?
Ask him, he's been there 30 years.
All right, Sandy, you're on. How come?
Well, they didn't ignore my ballot, so I didn't pay much attention to the rest.
There you go. But who knows? It's a good question.
Yeah, it's a good question.
All right, Dolores.
What is behind this?
Oh, I'm sorry. This is Charlie. Thanks for this for cell phone. She looked up the statistics on U.S. Senate races in the state of New Mexico. These are petition requirements. And given that the independent parties actually were driven out of the state, there are 20% of our voters who are now registered as independents. And I say that the threshold is unreasonably high at this point.
The minor party is what John Barry's trying to do.
No, he's doing independent.
He's doing independent.
American Independent. He was trying, yeah, he was trying to get a party registered. He was
No,
passing around.
independent.
trying to get a party to register.
So you said they were following the minor party.
Now, when you say registered independent, is that defined the state, or are they saying?
Yeah, independent, I assume is the
No.
part of the party.
You're not, independent is if you are not a declared party in this state. That is registered with the Secretary of State, and I don't believe we have any active minor parties at this time. They were all eliminated.
No, the
we
Greens
don't.
are not.
No green anymore, so it's just Republicans, Democrats, and
People are still registered as Greens, though.
Oh, you can still
You can
register, but
register.
you
You can
actually
be a
come
Druid.
under the independent category.
But my question about the independence, if you define the state, is that independent?
It's all under independent.
A matter of fact, unless you specifically write independent, you're going to be classified as declined to stay.
I had a friend in college registered as anarchist.
Well, it will show up as
That's
that, but
Antichrist.
you are lumped into this category. You are not a minor party unless you have met the criteria and are registered with the Secretary of State, and there are no minor parties at this moment.
Okay, Janice, I want you to explain, what's the 2% and 4%? What is the 2%?
The 2% figure is for the pre-primary ballot, or the primary ballot.
Primary ballot.
And it is based on the votes cast for the last time a member of your party was nominated for that office. And so you'll notice that the Democrats and Republicans are relatively similar because during that nomination process on the primary side, the votes were relatively similar. That's kind of where that formula comes from. You don't need one for the independents of the minor because they don't file until June 5th. So if, and they don't have a primary. And there are two things that have to happen. Under our current system, at the pre-primary convention, if you are a federal office, you must get 20% of that convention to get on the ballot. Once you're there, you're done. If you don't, there's a get-out-of-jail-free card, which is the 4% threshold, and you can go and get that, which is, for example, what Greg Sowers did. And that puts him on the ballot.
Okay.
But for him to get on the ballot, he still has to have the 18,000.
So if you're gonna run as an independent, you can only, it's only for the general election, you have to get 18,000 signatures.
Right.
Yeah. Well, there you go. That encourages a lot of people to be independent then.
Well, I'm saying, and make no mistake, having sat on voters and elections for the time that I did, there was a concentrated effort by both parties to eliminate any minor parties. And it was kind of remarkable to watch. Now, make no mistake, I am a Republican, and I didn't, I will never be a Greenie. But what does that do to your belief that you should be able to participate?
That's right. Exactly. Okay, I've got Robbie, David Walker, and Mark. Robbie, you're up.
Hey, question first. The figures on the board, Senate figures, that's Heinrich and Wilson?
Correct.
And I thought Heinrich was way ahead at this moment.
No, this is what it takes to get onto the ballot.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Signatures to get on the ballot. Let me rephrase that. Qualified signatures to get on the ballot. That's what he needs.
All right.
And the other piece I needed to tell you about qualified signatures. Every signature turned in, even if you went through the phone book, is qualified until someone challenges it. And if it is not challenged, you can have Donald Duck 1,000 times. It's a legal signature.
There you go. Okay, Robbie, make your points.
Okay, the other thing that you said, Mrs. Arnold-Jones, was something about gathering signatures for petitions. My experience with this has been normally out in front of one of Smith's stores. And I have discovered that you have to be very careful watching people, because the lady with 3 bags of groceries and 2 little toddlers on a leash are going to find it very difficult to sign a petition, and you will bother her. And if you bother her, she's going to be bothered, and she's going to bother 2 or 3 other people about this insufferable bore who wants me to sign his petition. Then there's the guy who wants to screw you up to your petition. He's going to do it deliberately. He knows that you're a Republican, he's going to be a Democrat, and he's going to screw it up. And then there's a guy, I'll just give you these 3 these three examples. I can give you the rest of the day with these things. Then there are people who come in to the store and they're just tired and they don't want to fill the damn thing out. And if you figure it out, there's got to be 5 different blocks on that thing that you have to fill out. And I'm only in there to get a bottle of milk and get out and leave me alone. But you have to learn how to read that. You have to see it, because if you spend a lot of time getting a signature on a petition, which may be valid, but it's taken you a long time, you have wasted the time that you should have been spending on 3 other people picking up these things. This has been my experience.
May I ask a question?
Please, go ahead.
I was just, Bobby, it's interesting to hear you say that, because as a Republican, the one place I don't go is to a grocery store or Walmart, because it is so hard to peel out who the appropriate signature person is. Is that a problem for you?
You bet. You got that exactly right. I don't do that anymore.
You just get signatures?
I don't know. I don't,
oh, you don't go to the store?
I don't go to Smith's anymore.
Okay.
There you go.
Interesting.
I've had enough of Smith's.
David, my pardon, David, because I skipped Dolores inadvertently. Absolutely. Dolores, you're up.
In response to Jim's diatribe, this morning on the news, the director of prisons or whatever informed all of us that we should be really proud of Obama's health care. He's giving complete medical and dental exams at our cost to all incarcerated illegal aliens. That might be another place to check for help.
This diatribe, I'm not a linguistic kind of person. Does that have negative connotations?
No, that's a good
thing.
Oh, it's a good thing.
It's like being a Navajo.
I thought I had friends.
We hear. Okay, David Walker.
I have two quick things. One is to Mark. Mark,
Sir.
I wanted to tell you my story. When I moved here, I registered as an independent, and wrote that, but I showed up on all the lists as a declined to state. So in voter vault on everything. Okay, so clerks have. I may have misunderstood what you said, but certainly that was my experience.
You and I are...
Okay, we're cool. All right. And the second is a question to Janice. Now, there's something that I thought I understood, but I don't. I've been clear that I don't. Recently, the candidate that I preferred for the prosecuting attorney's job here against Kerry came up 80 signatures short.
Correct.
Okay, and I understood you to say that if they didn't come up 100 signatures short, they would still be on the ballot. What's the story?
Well, my point was that the judges have a very wide interpretation, and what's going to happen in the next week, you will see this. So in this case, what they found in that particular court case was, in fact, 79 of those signatures were good, but 1 was bad, and it left that individual short, and they were kicked off the ballot. The judge was Nan Nash. Now we have the issue coming up this week. Yes, one, because when you take this to court, they will go line by line by line. So, but it was still 1 short, and Nan Nash said the rule is this many signatures, you're short, you're out of here. There is a whole raft of case law that has not done that. So now comes the cases of people who ran in multi-district districts who failed to put their district designation on there. And you can see going across the state already that those decisions are in conflict. And the judges have ruled differently depending on where you are. As an example, I think I just picked up that in McKinley County, they ruled that it wasn't necessary to follow the law, but another part of the state has already ruled that it is necessary. And so we're completely in conflict. And so my point is going back to the judicial standard. If the judges are in such conflict over the law, what are we to do with those?
Right.
And I don't know if you have, what do you say? I mean, if you were there, what would you do?
Me?
Yeah.
Well, first of all, I wouldn't be wearing my Republican or my Democratic cap if I were a judge. I told a lot of you know that. What's important to me is to get people with the right stuff into office and not worry about their party, particularly when you talk about the judiciary. But I would say the law is the law. I wouldn't have had 100 signature margins that I pulled out of somewhere. this to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court rules quickly on it. Because of the conflict. But then what do? See if they say, I mean, how do you look back? What I'm trying to say is that the Supreme Court says, no, the law's the law and you should all be following it. Is there a bunch of stuff that needs to be undone?
In this case, the law that was put in place, and actually I think we did this in 2009, where it said that the district, that you must accurately describe the office that you are running for. And that included a district number or a number if it was there. That's what it said. I think it was pretty clear.
This all makes my point that, though, in my view, of course, everything makes my point. See. But this makes my point that I think that the requirement for signatures is superfluous. I don't think it. I think it's a bad requirement. And the fact that you might, God, I wish I could think of 28 people running for office sometime who wanted to. That would be a wonderful thing, in my view.
Well, and the other side, for Republicans in particular, we have gone through, and this year I'm so excited the last 2 years, because we had candidates. There was a period when I first raised my hand, there were no candidates.
Nobody would step up.
Nobody would step up. And was the barrier the petitions? I don't think so. And would it have been the 50, in the past we had a $50 filing fee. Is that the barrier? I don't know what the answer is.
Well, see, years ago, in Erica's district, you see you're 55% Democrat,
Right.
and then another 20 or 30% independent.
18% independent, 20% Republican.
20% Republican. Now, in that district before, nobody would ever step up, not even close. But there's opportunity there, and Erica sees that, so that's a good thing. But in the past, there's been a lot of discouragement within the Republican Party. Well, you can't win in that district, don't even waste your time. What a baloney thing to say. It's
Right.
stupid. And
Well, and just one thing, when I first ran, I mean, this part of petitions and qualifying and getting elected really seemed very, very much like it had nothing to do with the job.
Right.
And in many ways, that's true, except that if we are engaged at this point, you have the remarkable opportunity to change the conversation. And that is the most important thing about having candidates. Without a candidate, without opposing views, you have no conversation.
That's correct.
Okay, Mark, you're up.
The Boy Scout version.
Took off his coat.
The Boy Scout. You got hot in here,
I was watching how he said, but I can tell we're all going to get
The idea of disenfranchisement by looking at the petition and who you kick off and so forth, do you disenfranchise people from being able to vote? And the petition process is in fact a way of eliminating people from having the free ballot access.
Yep.
And of course, we went through the 60s with the Civil Rights, Voters Act and so forth that should have reinforced that, but it didn't crack through the underlying idea. And if you read the first article of the Constitution about how you select representatives and senators, and it would filter down to the several states, as they call it, they don't talk about who gets to vote other than the citizenry. By the people, actually, is what they call it. So if you're a people and you want to vote, you ought to be able to vote. And if you don't want to vote for somebody that a party has chosen, which is made up of the people, but they then have undue influence. I'm not saying the parties ought to go away. I just think that they have created situations like where only the Democrats and Republicans have a seat at the table.
Right.
And the independents
are
being disenfranchised by a number that's 3.5 times larger than what's required. To the comment about the medical and dental provisions in prison, I gather you were saying that was Greg McIntyre, the state
I didn't get this.
Okay.
No, she's talking federally.
Federal.
Yeah.
All right, well, the answer to that is, once you take somebody into custody, whatever the government is, you own them.
That's true.
And you have to provide for them. We do not do as some Central American countries do, where if you get arrested, your family better bring you food, where you pay the state to keep you alive. We are a little more civilized than that, even though we are one of the few countries that still engages in the death penalty. We do have a long process to get there, but starvation is not one of them. So when you take in prisoners, you've got to maintain their health, and it is at a level that's mandated by courts where unreasonable systems have failed to do what's required.
Okay, very good, very good. Okay, at 11:30 we're going to do our 1-minute go-arounds. I've got Jim Roller, Chuck Ring, Galen, and Janice in that order, and if we have time for some more, we'll add some more to Chip. We'll put him on the list. Okay, Jim Roller.
I gotta try.
Yes.
Mr.
I don't know much. I went into a library the other day and I walked around and my God, there was all kinds of stuff I didn't know. I just went row after row, book after book. I didn't know almost anything about any of it. So most of the things I say are probably wrong, and I don't know much of anything. And I'm usually wrong about my terminology. In England, my understanding is that they have what is called how they work on disputes or misunderstandings is a system of I think it's the legal people call it a justice system. Okay. Now, in the United States, that's not what we do, because in the United States we have a legal system, and so our system is based on law. And you know what pieces of paper you can bring, and you say, well, this is what we did before, and this is what we did, and they argue. Well, this one, but they really are arguing over the different stacks of paper. And in some real sense, they don't give a damn about what's right and what's wrong. Poor people starve, poor people get rich. Rich people get rich, rich people starve. Nobody gives a damn because it's all this stack of paper. In England, it's completely different. You come in there, and you come in, and the judge says, what's the right thing to do? What is the intent of what is good for, and those kinds of questions. Now, there's a downside to that, because you kind of think, well, I'd like somebody to treat me fairly. If they make a decision, you think like, well, on what basis would you appeal? Well, I don't think I like the way he said I was something. And you go, well, what are you going to ask another guy? And you say, well, yeah, so they say, that's it, you're done. In the United States, you get another guy says, well, I didn't like your piece of paper, and here's why. Here's my retort to your decision. And so you get a chance to appeal. And you can appeal all the way to wherever it stops, depending on how it goes. So that has some benefits. But let me say that if you're in the DR environment, I think you're in the DR environment, it is the biggest cesspool of paperwork, which has no application. And I think we used to have a couple people, one guy lost his family, his kid, they took his left testicle. I mean, it was bad.
It was bad.
And the thing is, it was completely legal by the paperwork, but it had no justice whatsoever. It was, I mean, you kind of think if you found those people in a room, you'd say, if I had a gun, I'd have to shoot 3 of them because they're just, but do you think like, no, it's the law.
The paper says no.
The paper says no. And so when you're saying, well, the law says on this signature thing, the law, well, then you're getting into that, what's my piece of paper versus your piece of paper, and we got to go fight about paper. Now, the court sometimes, illegally, I might add, because it's not a piece of paper, they say, what was the intent? What were the people that wrote this? What were we trying to achieve? And they're trying to do that in the Supreme Court now, because they're saying, well, health care might be different because it's important, and I'm a strict constructionist on big issues, but I am a justice person, more like Britain, on the little issues. And if you would just bring back a couple of simple things, and one of the most important ones to bring back into state law is the law of dueling. I agree. If a son of a bitch calls you something and it just gets insult somebody, you get ready to be a real jerk, and you think like, this could get me killed. And all of a sudden, you become a nicer person.
Excellent, thank you. Let me respond briefly, very briefly. First of all, shockingly, I agree with very much of what you said. When I moved from Virginia years ago, we still had on the books a statute of insulting words, which was part of the dueling statute. So they recognized that violence, while not the answer to everything, was sometimes the answer to some things. So I'm very sympathetic to that. But one of the things, when you talked about the Sanford's involvement in the DR process, you have to understand that when you get in civil, under our law, the paper law that you talk about, when you get into civil disputes, we may administer justice once in a while, but it's by accident, or that's not the intent. Our intent is this, and you're right, but I want everybody here to know it. Our intent is this. We have disagreements before us that we believe reasonable people could settle, and they don't. So it's our job to give answers. It's a job to answer the question and put it into the dispute. That's the primary role in civil matters that the court has under our system. That's what it is. It's not like what's fair, who needs what, how, that's not it. That's not what it's about.
There you go. Okay.
As I well know, after $750,000, 26 court cases, I'm kind of aware of how this thing works.
Well, let me tell you, I am too, and lawyers always make a mess of their own divorces, so I can talk about that.
All right, let's finish up here. Chuck Rick.
Well, I was going to say something, but I can't follow that. If he would have said doodling instead of doodling.
It sounds more fun somehow.
Yeah.
Okay, Galen.
Oh, man, did you throw a lot.
Okay, but make it quick.
All right, the thing about disenfranchising the independents. The poor independents. No, they disenfranchise themselves. No one forces them to put independent or decline to stay on their registration. That's a protest. That is a protest against the two-party system. Why do we have a two-party system? Go look at some of the countries that have multi-party systems.
Oh, yeah.
Where you've got 147 candidates for resident. Well, one thing you can say about that, results of that vote, it ain't very likely that the winner is going to have a majority.
So you might have to cooperate with someone?
What we have
Like
here,
us Democrats?
what we have here is we have a collective determination of what the majority of the people want. That's why we primarily have a two-party system. And if somebody doesn't like that, they can come along and form another party. And if they can get enough people to support it, they can become one of the two major parties.
Can I interject?
Don't stop that.
Janice said right up front, the problem with your argument. She said that the Democrats, God love them, and the Republicans, God curse them, that they sat down together and they said, well, I don't know what the game is, but we're sure as hell not going to let anybody else in our game because we're the two biggest crooks in town. And I tell you, I would run for governor in a heartbeat if I didn't have to have 18,000 signatures. And I'd have to put up with the guys that are Republicans and Democrats.
We rest our case. There we go. Okay.
And there's 147 more like you.
Well, all right,
I think you ought to have a chance.
Let's keep moving on.
No, wait a minute.
Very quickly.
Yeah, the other thing I wanted to address from what Jim said was about DR. The problem with domestic relations is it functions like the English courts.
Okay.
Because the judges, rather than recognizing and following law in DR cases, decide that they are gods. And that they can decide for you what is good for you and your children. And I spent 20 years there fighting that stuff. Okay? The problem is judges ignore the law. And that's why Dave Sanders sits up there and says, when I get to be a judge, that's going to change. Because people are going to know what to expect. People are going to know that they are going to be held responsible for their decisions. There's going to be accountability. Okay? And that's what the DR court needs, in my opinion.
Okay, very good. Okay, now Janice.
Okay, so, the phone call was from Representative Anderson. He begs your apologies, sent you greetings, but he is in a petition challenge.
Oh.
And is on, in court on Monday, and just asked me to share with you that their requirement was 110 signatures. He turned in almost 300. His opponent turned in 130. That's a 20 signature cushion. 19 were duplicate, 15 were Democrats, and they challenged an additional 51 signatures. And yet, my guess is they will go to court, and anybody want to put money on this? Because I will bet this will be thrown out. I will bet it will be thrown out.
The challenge will be thrown out.
Yep.
Tom has done the challenging?
Yes. Yes. So anyway, but I wanted to pick up on something that we sort of talked about tangentially. As you might imagine, there has been a lot of discussion from where I am about Obamacare, the validity of the law, why we need it. There are a number of people who have cancer who currently feel that this is their only way to get the insurance policy issue resolved. And doing a cursory look, you know, the truth is we have no bills out there dealing with insurance as an industry at this moment. But as a result of two different discussions, with all due respect, and I was talking with Democrats.
Oh, no.
And they came to this conclusion separately. One is that there needed to be an incentive that we give to ourselves so we don't use the emergency room. And when I said why, I never could get an answer. And the other thing that came out of these two different discussions was that we need to require that all illegal immigrants have health insurance. Okay. I don't think I'm going to win this discussion.
Right. That's no time for
I think it was like,
Okay, we got 5 minutes. We got 3 people left on the list, so go quickly. Chad, you're up.
Day before yesterday, or maybe the day before that, in the paper, big headlines about how KPS's graduation rates are going to go down because of changing the way they calculate it.
Right.
And this seems to me to be a fairly straightforward mathematical problem. You have some number of kids starting 9th grade, some number of kids graduating, and you arrive at a graduation rate. I don't know how they can have a whole new system without admitting that the previous system was bad or the new system's bad or something. Just the machinations that go on to get these numbers are indefensible, I think. And then on the subject of the petition, I probably went over to APS and got a CD, and I'm having a transcript made of the hearing of our petition. And I think what we need to do is address every objection that they brought up, and then see if we can get our objections published in the paper maybe. It doesn't look like we're going to get a due process from the board.
Okay. All right. Very good. David Harris.
Yeah, I want to just, in the municipal elections, at least in Rio Rancho, for example, they have several candidates running for different districts and for mayor. And at the end of that election, if somebody doesn't get 50%, they have a runoff with the top 2 players. And I think that's a reasonable way to sort of weed out the chaff and have a very successful way of the public being able to both run for an office unhindered and also to have an election of good solid candidates at the end of the game.
Well, and just to add there, you know, that is the California system, except after you get to the top 2, it is irrespective of party.
It is.
The top 2 run, period.
Well, and I think even below, it's irrespective of party. At least in the municipal elections, it's a nonpartisan activity. Supposedly. So what's wrong with that?
Yeah, what's wrong with that? Okay, last one, Roger, go for it.
I'm one who seeks root causes for problems like this. We've talked about a lot of things today, and I think Jim is on the right track. The root cause does go back to England. You know, it was when that wussy coward John signed signed that crazy piece of paper in 1215. And all this crap came about because of it. You know, if we just continue the English system, we wouldn't have all these questions and problems.
Excellent, excellent information, Roger. Very good, okay.